Well, anyone following Mark Levin has a tough act to follow, but we're going to try, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
I came across an article not too long ago where an American commentator was looking at different things, trying to assess the state of this country as it faced a moment of particular opportunity. He looked at economic situations in our cities, compared them with things in towns and communities, rural communities. He looked at birth rates. He looked at family formation. He looked at the cost of starting a business. And he came to the conclusion that all of those things were going to be important in assessing America's potential, which he believed would be powerful, even though it was at a time of great uncertainty. That commentator could have been someone like Arthur Murray, who just put out a recent book called Coming Apart, a seminal study on the family in America, but it wasn't.
Charles Murray.
The person who looked at that mix of things, trying to assess our opportunity as a nation, was Benjamin Franklin in 1755. He concluded that based on the progress our country was making on those mix of factors, that our best days were yet ahead. Well, we're here to talk about an opportunity to revisit much the very same mix. ACU, the American Conservative Union Foundation, working with terrific economists and eventually state-based leaders throughout this country, has put together something called the Family Prosperity Initiative. We're here to spend some time talking today about how that can help you out in each of your communities, work with neighbors to understand the impact of policies on the things that matter most to all of us. We can all look at national measurements and get a sense of what they mean, but prosperity and success is a personal experience. It happens up close. So I'm delighted and honored today to be joined by four distinguished panelists on stage. We're going to spend a few moments talking about some of these factors and what you can do to use them in your advocacy and work in your communities. We'll hear statements from each of our panelists just briefly as we open. We'll begin with Mr. Larry Kudlow, who's known to so many of you, a longtime economist, commentator around the country, and terrific. He'll be followed by Ms. Jelaine Appling, who's the Executive Director of Wisconsin Family Action. Then Dr. Wendy Warszawick, who was one of the economists who helped put this tremendous index together. And finally, we'll hear from former Congressman Bob Beaupre, two-time congressman from the state of Colorado. Mr. Kudlow.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I want to talk about a subject that is, I guess, not my usual discussion on the air, but a very important topic: marriage. Marriage. Economists should pay more attention to and think more about marriage. So, the battle will rage. The biggest issue of our time at home is the lack of economic growth. The issue is, why? There are a lot of reasons. I'm not going to walk through taxes and regulations because that's what I normally do. Much of the reduction of growth is coming from an increase in poverty, which is caused by family breakup. That's where it's coming. Study after study has shown married families make more income, make more wealth, and are happier. That's right, happier. I've been married 28 years to a saint. I'm very grateful, and I have a smile on my face. So I want to talk about this for a moment. Family breakup versus marriage. To my way of thinking, there's a path. It's a cultural path, but it becomes a societal cultural path. Hear me out on this. You have a kid, young kid, 8, 10, 12 years old, okay? And that kid comes from a broken family. and his or her chances of success are low. That's what the numbers show. They're low. So I suggest the following. Number one, make sure that kid finishes school. School. High school, minimum, maybe community college, learn a skill, maybe go on to a four-year college, but schooling is so important. We're not doing that anymore. We're not doing that anymore. Number two, get a job. Get a job. No matter how good or not good, you're not going to start as the CEO, just get a job. And you know why? Showing up every day is a responsible way of living, and the sooner you get that, the better off you're going to be. It's almost a lost cultural issue. Just work. Now, number three, you meet a girl, you meet a boy. Great. As my wife, my saintly wife, says all the time, before you make any decisions, do your research. Do your research. I don't know, I must have proposed to my wife, I don't know, 3, 4 times, I can't even remember. Finally, she hit the bid. Finally. She was checking me out. I don't blame her. But the real lesson here is not to just jump into bed together, but spend some time talking, learning, relationship building. And then, and here's my key point, and then you have your schooling, you still have to have your job, you go on ahead and get married after some time, and then you have the kid. My point, thank you, appreciate it, I really do. My point is, we are doing it backwards. Backwards. We're having the kid first. Don't even bother with the marriage. Don't even bother with a job. Don't even bother with the education. Where this has come from, I don't know. We've lost track of a very traditional American value, and that is the culture of marriage and child rearing. We must not lose that. A few more points. So much of this is, as I said, a cultural issue, a social issue. It is passed on from generation to generation, but it's very important. Some of it, however, does have to do with economics and the federal government, the role of the federal government. The role of the federal government for the last 5 decades or so has been inimical, in opposition to the kind of traditional culture of marriage and family and child rearing that I'm talking about. The government is providing assistance for people to have out-of-wedlock children, to have fatherless children, not to work, not to fulfill your responsibility in parenting. The government is handing out money and tax credits or direct federal assistance. And it's wrong. I'm not here to be a killjoy. All right? I'm not saying I don't believe in the safety net. My brother, Mark Levin, was just talking. We both worked in the Reagan administration. Ronald Reagan believed in the safety net up to a point. Up to a point. But welfare is not a substitute for marriage, for child rearing, for education, for living responsibly, for making responsible choices. Welfare is not a substitute for any of that. None of it. So I'll go back and end where I started. We have a big problem in this country. We haven't grown the economy in virtually 15 years. The numbers are stark. 1.7% annual rate for the past 15 years under Democratic and Republican presidents and Congresses. They haven't delivered. For the whole prior 50 years, the American economy post-war grew at 3.5% per year. 15 years, most recently, 1.7%. What is that all about? It's about lousy policies, and I'm not going to go through all that, except to say this. The problem of growth and the problem of poverty are the real issues, not inequality, not socialism, government spending, not high taxing the rich, not penalizing American success. The problem is American values, traditional American values, and the decline of the culture of family and marriage. And only we can change this, or bolster it, or teach it. Do you follow me? No bureaucrat is going to teach us that. No House member, no Senate member, God bless all of them. You have to do it right where you are at home in your lives. There are right decisions and wrong decisions. The rise of the poverty class is so tightly linked to the incidence of divorce and out-of-wedlock marriages and kids. It is so tightly related. So you'll hear a lot of good statistics and numbers and indicators about this. I just want to say that not everything is an economic problem. That's me, Kudlow, saying not everything is an economic problem. There are some problems that are social and cultural. And I beg everybody, I'd like to see these candidates talk about it on the stump. We must return to the value and the culture of marriage and parenting and teaching kids the right decisions, not the wrong ones. And if we do that, we'll increase the growth rate, we'll make people happier, and America will be a better country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kudlow. Jelaine.
Well, first of all, let me say that Mr. Kudlow has my vote for president. Thank you for those great remarks, and I completely concur with them. I would say, too, I'm not an economist, but I am a champion for families, and I'm the end user of the kind of products that we're talking about today, the Family Prosperity Index developed by my friends Dr. Wendy Warcholik and Scott Moody. And as I listen to Mr. Kudlow, I'm reminded of several things. First and foremost, I think, is that we need to get rid of the misconception that conservatives are without compassion. We are truly concerned about the well-being of the entire person. And we understand that that well-being is mostly fostered through the family unit. And that family unit begins with strong marriages between a mom and a dad, the natural birth parents as much as possible. I'm adopted, so I include adopted people in there too. But that's the nucleus of how we bring the next generation into this country to make them well-adjusted, profitable, profit-making, contributing citizens. That's the heartbeat of our country. It amazes me that we have ever thought that we could talk about economics without talking about the family. Because it hinges, the economic picture in America, and really in any country, hinges on the well-being of the family. Several years ago, I gave a speech to a mixed group of conservatives, and I entitled the speech, "As the State, as the Family, So the State." And I'm from Wisconsin. I was speaking to people there. I was using Wisconsin numbers, but what I was trying to do was to take the statistics that our state is affording us through all the different agencies that we have that track things like divorce rate, marriage rate, abortion rates, all the fertility rates and all of that, and put together for them a picture that says, we really need to find a way to bring the fiscal conservatives and the social conservatives together, not for ideological purposes, but for survival purposes. We need to find a way to cooperate so that we understand we're all about the same thing, which is making and keeping America great, and keeping us a free people. My friends, truly, when the family units are strong in our states and our country, we can have limited government. But until and unless we return to these strong family units that are in the best interests of the next generation, we stand to lose our freedom. We stand to lose the ability to have a limited government and have a free and prosperous people. I think if you took what Mr. Kudlow said about the economy over the last 15 years and you superimposed over that the marriage rate nationally, I know in Wisconsin we've dropped 20% in our marriage rate over the last 20 or 30 years. We've been below replacement birth rate for 40 years. Now, it's hard to find taxpayers and workers and all of that when you don't have people. You know, a 1.9 per woman birth rate is significantly below the 2.1 children per woman that you need to have just to keep your population steady. So this is an important topic. The Family Prosperity Index affords us real data that links these variables that we've been talking about, the very issues that Mr. Kudlow was addressing here about marriage and about the economy of the family and the policies that are put in place by government that make it more difficult for people to have a good job, to find a good job, keep a job, increase their salary and their household income. Those are very real situations. I close with this. I love the fact that Ronald Reagan is being mentioned here so frequently at CPAC this year. A lot of people don't realize this, but on September the 2nd in 1987, after 3 years of consulting with senior advisors, President Reagan issued, and please don't hold this against him or me, an executive order. And it was not the kind of executive order that we've seen over the last 8 years. This was truly an executive order that was towards his administration. It had no lawmaking capacity. It was an approach from the president to say to his agency chiefs, his staff, everybody in his administration, look, before you put a project, a policy, or anything in place, I want you to subject it to a litmus test. The executive order was entitled The Family. It's an incredible document. It's 12606. I urge you to read it. He had about 6 or 8 points in which he laid out questions that the agencies were supposed to ask themselves about how the policy or the program or the project would impact the family unit. Would it increase their earnings or decrease them? What's the merit for the program? Does it make the family stronger? Those are questions that he wanted his entire administration to address. I think we need to get back to that. I think every single elected official needs to get back to that because it would force them to understand that as the family, so the state. The Family Prosperity Index does that in just a beautiful way. It enables somebody like me to use it to affect real change in my state as I work with legislators to say to them, look, we need to pass policies that increase the likelihood of people being able to get good jobs, keep their good jobs, rear their families, make choices. One of the things that I think is so important when families have sufficient income, one of the things they can do is they can make school choices. They're not bound into a one-track system. They have that ability to say, I want to go to a private school, I want to go a different route for the education of my children. That's significant. But that's just one of the kinds of opportunities that people who are prospering as families have. So thank you, first of all, to Wendy and Scott for the development of the index, and I think it is going to be a game changer in the way that we are able to talk to legislators about the nexus of the economy and the family.
Okay. Dr. Warszawiak. The word economy comes from a Greek word that starts with household. And for a long time, we use the word economy in our own common parlance as though it's purely financial. But household and finances, those two things really go together. Dr. Warszawiak, tell us about how this has come together and give us some background on the index and the initiative.
Sure. Well, thank you, Stan. While I'm an economist, I'm also someone who has suffered the turmoil associated with divorce, and that combination of experience on being an economist on the economic side and having been a child of divorce is what drove my husband and I, and it's my personal story, to create this index. I'm that little girl who was sitting before the court-appointed judge because my mom wanted to reduce the amount of time I was going to spend with my dad. And as a little girl, I adored my dad. I'm that little girl who was sitting in a train station in a large city waiting for my stepmother to pick me up in the wee hours of the morning. And my stepmother never showed up. I'm my mom and dad. I'm the child of divorce, as I mentioned, and so both my parents have gone through multiple divorces in their lives. So there were times when I didn't know how I was going to pay for things, food, clothing, because I wasn't always living with my parents. So I'm an economist, but I've also seen the social turmoil associated with the breakup of a family. So this is personal to me as well. And unfortunately, I'm the only one amongst my several siblings who was able to escape that turmoil associated, both the emotional and economic turmoil associated with divorce. Some of the unfortunate results for them have been substance abuse, government dependency, lower educational attainment, and the list goes on. I'm sure I don't have to, you get the point. But as an economist, having marinated on the fiscal policy side and professionally having already built an index, I was one of the original creators of the Tax Foundation's Business Tax Climate Index, looking at how taxes impede our freedom. That's existed for for over 15 years. And then there's gross domestic product. There are all these economic measures that measure the state of our well-being, the state of our prosperity. And then on the social side, siloed on the social side, back in the 1990s, Dr. Bill Bennett created the Index of Leading Cultural Indicators. So we have these economic measures that measure that measure the economic well-being of our culture, and we have a social measure that looks at the trends of social indicators in our culture. But to date, until the Family Prosperity Index, we never had a measure that brings all that data together, both the economic and social side of things, to look at the behavior of the entire person. And so with this index, we will be able to look at the behavior of the entire person.
Terrific. And I should mention, for those of you who might be looking at your devices right now, if you go to familyprosperity.org, you can see this already in action. 5 years of the data have been posted. You can see the results for your state. You can drill down into different variables, look at what's going on, and see how this index is put together. So I'd encourage you to do that. And now I'd like to offer Congressman Beaupre a moment to.
Thank you, Stan. I'll begin by applauding Wendy and her husband Scott for developing this index. I'm very proud to be a member of the board of the American Conservative Union, and we're going to do all we can to make sure that this is universally adopted and applied, and hopefully move the needle in the right direction for a change with our families and with our nation. I wrote a book, published in January of 2009, and I was bold enough, confident enough, I guess, to suggest an agenda for America, specifically for conservatives and our nation, to get back on track. And that agenda it's still familiar to you. We've got to win the war against radical Islam. We've got to fix our border. We need a pro-business, pro-free market energy policy. We've got to fix our education system. We've got to do a number of things that we all know. And the differences I drew in that book between a liberal progressive idea of how to address these issues and a conservative plan were pretty stark. But the last chapter in the book, on purpose, was one that I titled Stand Up for America's Culture. And I brought all of that together, and I said that the difference between a liberal Democrat, they would call progressive agenda, and a conservative Republican agenda on dealing with those cultural issues, I think is the greatest of all the other issues that we faced. I think it's the most profound. Democrats, for example, Democrats, progressive, liberals, whichever term they prefer, who are the ones, us or them, that are always fighting to weaken traditional marriage? Which party, which ideology is always trying to liberalize abortion? Which one is trying to suppress religious freedom? And which one wraps their arms around the Hollywood culture that is trying to legitimize moral decay? You know the answer to that, and I know the answer to that. And it's had a terrible impact on America and what made this country great. I wrote these words as well. Freedom without moral responsibility leads to tyranny and decay of society, not to the perpetuation of a great and noble culture. And we all know all you have to do is study ancient Rome or Egypt or Greece to prove that point. I went on, freedom does not come at the expense of another. It is shared equally and defended equally by all and for all. Ladies and gentlemen, I know because I've run some campaigns, and there's a lot of conservatives say we've got to leave our culture out of this. We got to deal with all those other things that are critically important. I submit to you that if we don't stand up and defend the great American culture, the traditional values, the traditional morals, those Judeo-Christian principles, we may as well forget all the rest, because there won't be an American culture left to fight for.
Thank you. As you stand back and look at what's going on in the country, each of us, I'm sure, has areas that are of particular concern. I think one of the great things about this initiative is that Dr. Warshawick and Scott, Wendy and Scott, have put together so many great things in this index. These variables tie together in the same way that you know common sense-wise they do. So there are parts of this index that deal with the economic health of your community. There are pieces that deal with demographic health, things that touch on rates of substance abuse, lots of other indicators that would make things work. Wendy, could you give us just an example of some of those connections so that people can understand? We're talking about an index, it's a number, but that number is also a story. Can you give us an example of one of those?
It is a story. Demographic winter, we're not having babies anymore in America, enough babies to support the aging population, and that's known as demographic winter. So as we're not having enough babies, our labor pool is shrinking as our population is aging, and that is indeed a significant problem. Actually, even if you're in a very young state, a red state even, like Oklahoma, there are still counties all over the country, regardless of what state you're in. 1/3 of all US counties are suffering from demographic winter, where there aren't enough young people to support the aging, those that are aging. So that is an example.
And of course that flows through to economic demand and all sorts of other things. Larry, if you could, as things progress forward, if you could pick something that to you would be a measure of success, something that would be the proverbial canary in the coal mine, only this time the canary that said, we're on track, something's improving, where would you look?
Well, I'd look at marriage rates, and I'd look at kids out of wedlock versus family. I think that's the nub of the issue. And, you know, I'd love to go through tax rates and say things that I've said for 40 years, but I'm troubled by this. I mean, you look at the evidence, and I've never seen so much clarity with respect to the problem of poverty and the linkage to the culture or the declining culture of marriage. And I think that the kids who are the future, who unfortunately are born out of wedlock or broken families or whatever, they're the ones that suffer the most, and we're hurting our future. We're literally hurting our future. So, you know, I would go there. I think that's a very important statistic. The other stuff is interesting to me, and I'm not an expert in this field, but I do have strong views about it. Married families is so interesting. Married families are wealthier and have more income than broken families. Absolutely. Now, that's a statistical fact. That's not a left-wing fact. That's not a right-wing fact. That's not a Democratic fact. That's not a Republican fact. That is just a fact. You know, sometimes you have to look at facts. And people should think about that. And it has to do with responsibilities and making right decisions and so forth and so on. So that's really key. I don't know why this is. Well, maybe I do. But politically, the Democratic Party does not want to face up to this issue. It just doesn't. I don't know why, by the way. Again, I don't know Why can't a Democrat stand up and say family breakup is bad? I mean, I don't know, but they don't. And I think the underlying reason there is their propensity to increase government assistance, which is very damaging, creates the wrong incentives. But I also want to say this. I mean, I'm a conservative. I worked for Ronald Reagan and so forth. But I'm disappointed that, with the possible exception of Ben Carson, the Republican candidates have not talked about this issue. I'm very disappointed. I think, you know, it crops up every now and then. I don't think it was even mentioned last night in the crazy debate. But Mark Levin was right. Ronald Reagan talked about it a lot. He did. He wasn't afraid to talk about it. And I don't think politicians or leaders should be afraid to talk about it. So here I am. I have virtually no knowledge in this field, except the fact that I'm married to a saint. And I'm talking about it. And the reason I'm talking about it, and started at a dinner in New York with a whole bunch of people, and my friend Cal Thomas wrote it up, which was very kind of him. I don't know. I believe it's true, and I believe there's enough documentation for ignorant people like myself to talk about it. Yeah. And my plea to you, everybody, my plea is, I want you to talk about it. I want you to talk about it in your daily lives and communities and school boards and, heaven forbid, political offices. You should talk about this stuff, because if you don't, nobody will.
Yeah. We've got just a couple of moments remaining. Jolene, could you take just a moment? You know, you've started to work on this a little bit in Wisconsin, and you've seen that new possibilities open when economic and social conservatives get together on these kinds of issues. Describe one of those for us just quickly.
Well, it changes the playing field, because suddenly the people who are in the policy-making decisions look at the data that you're able to give them to say, oh my word, there is a connection between the policies we enact, and that, for instance, that are about government handouts and government entitlement programs. In Wisconsin, we spend $36,000 of taxpayer money for single women to have children and not marry the father of those children. At some point, there's a breaking point out there. The general populace can only sustain that kind of taxation tyranny, if you will, so long. And when I'm able to bring the index and the ranking of Wisconsin and digging down into the sub-indices, I'm able to convince them that, as Mr. Kudlow was saying, the data's there. Now, they have to make a conscious decision, Stan, to either accept the data or discount the data and just completely walk away from the data. But at least they've been confronted with it, and it opens up an entirely different dialogue with folks who say, well, I just am about the economy, or I'm just about the jobs. I'm able to say with full assurance, you can't be just about the economy and just about the jobs unless you're also about the prosperity of families.
Thank you. You know, about 4 or 5 months ago, my wife and I had the opportunity. We've been married for almost 18 years. She's a saint, too. I had the opportunity to present in front of a room full of several hundred college-age young people from all over the world. And it was interesting to watch them approach this whole question. They're thinking about what they want to do with their future. And I think what they realize in their gut is what each of you realize if you've already started your family. Putting a family together is the fundamental act of entrepreneurship. You're going to have to put together a budget. You're going to have to deal with your income, your expenses. It's a long-term proposition. Our commitment to family at its basic level teaches entrepreneurship, but it turns out that by doing that thing as a couple, you also set the example. You prepare your kids for a culture where they can do all of those things and put that together. So our hope, and the thing that I would ask each of you to do, is join us in this conversation. Again, ACU Foundation's done a tremendous job putting this resource together and making it available. You're going to see not just the national conversation on this move forward, but we're going to be reaching into each of your states, looking closely at things that are happening in your communities, and it's our ultimate goal that each of the places where we live will become a better place to work, to live, and to raise a family. Thank you, and please join me in thanking our panelists.